Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world today. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Herb. I'm an alcoholic. Welcome to our Big Book Zoom 12-step workshop. Please join me in prayer for an open mind. God, please set aside everything that I think I know about myself, my brokenness, the 12 steps, and you, for an open mind and a new experience of myself, my brokenness, the 12 steps, and especially you. Please join me in the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. We've been on the journey for a while now. Bill uses the metaphor, the rocket launch. And the interesting part of that is that although we need to get into the rocket, once the rocket's launched, the rocket takes us to the destination. And as we reviewed before we even began this process, at the very early stages of our gathering, the destination is a spiritual awakening. A destination is a relationship with light. A destination is to be placed in orbit around that light. Staying with the rocket launch metaphor. Most of us, because of suffering from some form of addiction, seek a resource for resolution through the 12 steps. That's why we're here. Some of us have had that experience of freedom from our suffering, from our addiction, but we're still suffering from life, from reality, from our ineffectiveness in dealing with our life. And some of us who have done even some work and had some graces have the gift of a very serene, flourishing life. And yet we know there's more light. So it doesn't matter why you're here. The rocket will take you to a place that you probably don't even know exists, and yet you suspect it. Freedom certainly from your addiction. Freedom certainly from unmanageability. Those are wonderful experiences, gifts of this process. But even a life that flourishes on a continuous basis, not free from pain, but free from suffering. Big difference. We learn in that first step that we're powerless to deal effectively with our addiction, and even and especially to deal effectively with reality and our life. Unmanageable. And this is a process that gives us the power and a relationship with power to manage our lives in a very healthy way. But we need to find that power. And we have navigated a process through step 2 in chapter 4. We were asked by the book and by my own experience several questions as we read and reread and reread and discussed forever the big book and our concepts and our resistances and our negativities and our doubts and our hopes and our expectations. And we came to a conclusion. That was the invitation last week. To come to a conclusion. God is a choice, a free will choice. Or at the very least, that there is a power. I don't know what its name is. I don't know that it is, but I hope that it is, and I'm choosing that it is, and I'm going to now conduct myself as if it's real. That's step 2, a faith decision with no evidence. And then we move forward. The next step organically launched from step 1, powerlessness, into step 2, a search for power, and organically launched from there, that search for power, once we make a decision that it exists and that it exists deep in me, that I can have a relationship with it and that it's a caring power. The implications of step 3. Well, let's read step 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood God. Very interesting. Very dense, very succinct. Needs quite a bit of unpacking, which we will do over the next 3 workshops. Made a decision. Oh, again, like step 2, an act of my free will. A decision. The word surrender is not in the big book. In the first 164 pages, the word surrender is not in the big book. As I understand it, the word surrender is not in the 12 and 12, in the step dialogue. I heard it early in the meetings. I mouthed it for a long time, 10 years, in the meetings, because it sounded good and it felt right, as I didn't understand the depth of step 3. But now I do. I understand step 3. At least that's my interpretation. And I've experienced step 3. And surrender has no place in step 3. Surrender has a big place in step 1. Completely defeated. Raise the white flag. I give up. I surrender. I cannot do this, neither with my addiction nor with my managing my life. I surrender. I give up. I'm defeated. White flag. Surrender is a fabulous word for step 1. The reality is, of course, I was surrendered. Even there, I was powerless to surrender. But let's move on. So what is step 3? Made a decision. It's a ferocious act of my will. Not willfulness, but willingness. Willfulness is what we looked at in unmanageability, self-centered, that unhealthy ego. All about me, I'm the center of the universe. That's the unhealthy part we saw in unmanageability, manifested in those bedevilments. But willingness, that's the cornerstone, Bill says on page 47, placed on the foundation that sets the direction of the spiritual arch through which we're going to walk to a new freedom. Willingness is a decision, he says on page 53. What is your choice? And now, very formally in step 3, he says, made a decision. I make a decision. I'm moving forward based on my decision in step 2 to have a relationship with in step 3. Bill is not that clear about the term relationship. But when we get to pages 62 and 63 next week, that's the assignment for next week. I had you read 58 to 60 this week, and I'm going to unpack that now. But going forward, page 62 and 63 really unpacks and reveals the nature of step 3, a relationship. And he gives us 5 relationships, 3 at the bottom of page 62, one in the first paragraph on 63, and another one on the second paragraph on page 63. I'm saying that so that you can pay attention to it when you reread that material for next week, between now and next week. Bill asked us a fabulous question at the beginning of step 2. Where and how are we going to find that power? That question on page 45. where and how. And he answers it later on page 55. He does the same thing on page 60, which we will look again at next week. What do we mean and how do we do this, turning our will and our life over to God, over to the power of God, over to the care of God? What do we mean by it and what do we do? Pay attention. Those are questions that Bill uses that are not just throwaway questions. They're not just poetic or literary style. No, this is a pedagogy, a method of study, a method of inviting us to ask a question, to hold the question as we're reading the material that comes after it, because he answers it specifically. But he warms us up to it on pages 58 to 60. How it works. What a great title. How it works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. I think the operative word there is thoroughly. This material in step 3 has more absolutes and ideals than any other section of the step process. Absolutes and visions and ideals that he doesn't use in any other step. To continue the architectural analogy, he uses the word keystone. The third step, in contrast to the second step being the cornerstone, the third step is the keystone in this arch. Keystone, that component of this construction site at the apex of the arch that holds the entire arch together. That's how important it is, the third step. But there's no action here. There's no action in step 1 except collapse. There's no action in step 2 except a decision and some hope. And there's really no action in step 3 other than praying a prayer. But step 3 is the commitment, witnessed in public prayer, because he invites us to pray it with somebody else. A witness in public prayer to take the actions of steps 4 through 9, which he very carefully says on page 64, that is necessary for anything to happen, because making the decision and praying the prayer might make you feel good for a minute, but it won't last. That's my interpretation of what he says on page 64. Step 3 is not about action. It's about a commitment to action. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Obviously, the operative word in that partial sentence is completely. Hear the absolute, the black and white of this. Bill holds very high standards. The big book holds very high standards here in step 3. But that's why on page 60, he says, relax. It's not about perfection. It's about progress. We're not saints. We're human beings. We make progress. Like the dimmer switch, a great metaphor here for us on this journey. It goes up a click at a time, but only if we keep our shoulder connected to the dimmer switch. Look at my hands. If you keep the shoulder connected to the dimmer switch, leaning gently into it, but pushing it forward one notch at a time, the lights get brighter. We might not know that they're getting brighter when they're going up only subtly, incrementally, one click at a time. But eventually there'll be a sufficient amount of light that we know that there's more light for the very first time. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program, usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. We hear this material, at least in AA, in most of the meetings that we go to. Almost every meeting has this as its opening kind of reading to set the stage, how it works. And it's very appropriate, but because we hear it so often, we become brain dead to it. We actually don't know what it says. Oh, some of us have memorized it. Some of us could spout it off by rote, but we still don't know what it means because we've forgotten or we never really understood the words. That's why I'm taking my time with it. We're going to look at every sentence. Men and women who are constitutionally incapable. Constitutionally. What does that mean? Oh, by their very constitution, meaning their very biological genetics predisposition, they are not capable. Perhaps the sociopath or the psychopath. Serious. Bill spends 3, 4, 5 sentences on this concept. It's that important because people who come into program are severely damaged. Some from drugs and alcohol, some from trauma, some from predisposition of mental illness and or biological distortions. So he's really addressing it here. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. You see how he reinforces the biological perspective he's having here. Biological, genetically predisposed. They're not capable of being honest. They are naturally incapable, naturally by their very nature. Grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. That's the reason he's spending the time here. This is the key principle, rigorous honesty. Again, a very high standard, rigorous honesty, not just honesty. He puts a jackhammer word, an adjective, behind the word, jackhammer, rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. All right? They don't have much of a chance. Now he takes it to the next level. Pay attention. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders. Notice he's using 2 different words. He means 2 different categories. Emotional is different than mental. That's a pretty sophisticated sentence. Bill was being guided by psychiatrists and psychologists at the time. But he says many of these do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. They're damaged, but they're not so damaged that they don't have the capacity with some work, maybe some therapy, maybe with some medication. The other category of people are not going to be subject to therapy and medication. They're pretty irretrievable. It's what he's really saying. Their chances are less than average. Being kind. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. What we were like. What happened and what we are like now. Before we came into the recovery program, then the recovery program and its influence of us, and now how are we? And the whole point of that is identification, of course, for people. The story is not important other than the fact is, oh, I am like you were, but you are not like that now, and you did this. Maybe if I do that, I'll be like that, and I'll get what I want and need. The whole point of telling our story is identification, not entertainment. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, that was the question I asked you to ask yourself right at the beginning of our journey. Are you willing to go to any length, and what does it mean? And he tells us here, dash. Then you are ready to take certain steps. You see, he's warming us up here to the commitment in prayer in step 3, and then to the action of steps 4 through 9. That's what he means by any length. He doesn't mean anything dramatic or in any type of, how would you say, uncommon sense. It just means doing steps 4 through 9. At some of these we balked. An unusual term. Most of us who know anything about baseball can relate to the term balk, which is what the pitcher does when he winds up and he begins to throw at the batter, but midway through stops. He doesn't finish the pitch. He doesn't throw the ball. This is a reference to people who start the step work. They may do step 3 and entertain a little bit of step 4 and then either get scared or bored or get distracted. Or they do the 4th step, but they don't complete the sex inventory. Or they do the 4th step and they don't do their 5th step. Or they do their 5th step and don't do their 6th and 7th step. Or they do their 6th and 7th step and then they found an awful lot of freedom and they don't do 8 and 9. Who would want to do 8 and 9? Repairing the damage that you've done, not by your addiction, but by your dysfunction of personality. At some of these we balked. I think he could have said at all of these steps we balked. That's my experience personally as well as listening to other people. We thought we could find an easier, softer way. I lose a lot of people to therapy. I lose a lot of people to organized religion. I lose a lot of people to work or to relationships. Once they do for the first 3 steps, they feel a lot better and they just say, oh, got it now, got it. Yeah, I'm too busy to do the rest of this work. Not necessary. But we could not, with all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. That was the line I used to invite you into the set-aside attitude and the set-aside prayer. Let go your old ideas, your old knowledge, your old experience, and pray for it actually to be changed, not by you, but by the intervention of the Spirit. And he uses the term, we let go absolutely. Again, that high standard. Bill did not use any of the 4 absolutes from the Oxford group, but he certainly held very high standards of absolute here in the step 3 instructions. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. There is one who has all power, a decision you made in step 2. That one is God. That's your decision, what you call it. G-O-D is merely a symbol of that reality that has no symbol and no adequate words. We've had that conversation. May you find him now. You see, we're seekers. May you find this power now. This is the beginning of finding that power and establishing a relationship with that power. Half measures availed us nothing. Half measures won't get you 50%. Now, if we do the best we can, even though it's not the best we can, that is the best we can. That's not a half measure. That's a full measure to the best of our ability. I hope you can hear the subtlety of the difference of that. We stood at the turning point, made a decision to turn. Those are the words in the book. We stood at the turning point. Bill captured that, and we saw it last week when we reviewed the last part of Bill's story. We reviewed it again on page 14. Simple but not easy. A price had to be paid. What's the price? It meant the destruction of self-centeredness. How can I do that? I must turn in all things to the Father of light who presides over us all. This is the turning he is talking about here on page 14. I must turn in all things to light, that transcendent reality. We stood at the turning point. We asked. Again, that's code for prayer, isn't it? Whenever we're asking God, asking higher power, asking a power other than ourselves, that's a prayer. We're talking to this power, asking for protection, asking for intervention, protection and care with complete abandon. That word care is right in the step itself, made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care, not over to God. God gave us, by the assumptions of the big book, a very Christian orientation. God created us. God gave us free will. God gave us a mind to think. God doesn't want us to turn us over to God. At least that's my anthropomorphic interpretation. I was given free will in order to use my free will. My free will. And I'm using my free will in step 2 to say, I decide there is a God. I'm using my free will here in step 3 to say, and I am choosing to have a relationship with it. Here, the willingness of that, what Bill would call the absolute healthy and right use, correct use, proper use of the willpower. I'm not going to, we asked his protection and care with complete abandon. There again, that absolute. Can I abandon myself? No, I don't even know what that means. Does that mean I'm going to do this work and become a spiritual person and wear saffron robes and stand on the streets with a begging bowl? Yeah, no, that's just an old idea. No, it means I'm going to live like a decent human being in alignment with reality. More about that in a minute. Page 60. Many of us exclaimed, what an order. The 12 steps that he had just listed there. It's an impressive and overwhelming list at the beginning of our journey. The 4th step, inventory, and the 9th step, amends, especially, very intimidating to people, perhaps, who are not used to self-reflection and introspection. I can't go through with it. Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. Notice he uses a term here as a synonym for steps, because he doesn't want to use the same word in consecutive sentences. Principles, that's a synonym for steps here. We are not saints. We are not perfect, nor will we ever be perfect. Please, there's 30 or 40% of you I know that are perfectionists. That's not a badge of sanity or courage. It's actually a symptom of being severely neurotic. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. Oh, we're not saints. We're willing to grow along. Hear the dimmer switch here. We're willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. The principles, these steps are guardrails and guidelines, guide rails to walking the human path of evolution, human evolution to being optimally human. The proper use of my mind and the proper use of my will. The proper use of my mind is to know what reality is, and the proper use of my will is, in fact, to cooperate, accept, and adjust to reality. I don't have to use spiritual terms. I don't have to use traditional religious terms here. I'm talking about human development. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. That dimmer switch is on an infinite axle in pursuit of an infinite light. That's the magic here. There's always going to be more light, which is really good news for anybody who is really an addict, because we always want more, and there always will be more. More light, more power, more knowledge, more consciousness, more happiness, more joy. Not in the sense of the high that comes from a really strong cup of coffee or a really large bowl of ice cream or adrenaline. No, I don't mean that. That high of that satisfaction of being really conscious and really connected and really in harmony with reality. Our description of the alcoholic. Well, I'm a big book literalist and fundamentalist. What is he meaning here? He's about to give us a wrap up. Our description of the alcoholic. Oh yeah, doctor's opinion. Chapters 1, 2, and 3. That was all about alcohol and the disintegration that comes from alcohol or any form of addiction. Next phrase, the chapter to the agnostic. Oh yeah, that's chapter 4. Then he pauses because this is where we're at. And our personal adventures before and after, our experiences before coming into the program and our experiences after coming into the program. Make clear 3 pertinent things. Now, this is the platform, a recap of steps 1 and 2, and a bridge to step 3. A, that we were alcoholic, first half of the first step. We would substitute the word addict here because it's a invitation in this workshop to anybody with any addiction, not just alcohol. A, that we were an addict and could not manage our own lives, second half of the first step. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. That was our transition into step 2. C, that God could. This is now our deep dive into step 2. There is a power that has a sufficient power that is deep down inside of me that God could and would. And that it is a benevolent power, a caring power, and we're reaching over the bridge to step 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care. If God were sought, there's the condition, meaning continue to do the work of steps 4 through 9, which is clearing out the obstacles in us to the power that is in us. If the sunlight is in us, we got a lot of clouds in us too. And the clouds prevent us from connecting to the light. And steps 4 through 9 dissipate, diminish, and finally eliminate those clouds so the sunlight can shine in us, to us, and eventually through us. It's a wonderful organic process, and it's a great image. Being convinced, we are at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will and our life over to God as we understood God. Here's the question. Just what do we mean and what do we do? The questions that I indicated at the beginning of my discussion tonight. He's going to launch us now into the heart of step 3. Now, by Bill's structure, he takes us into self-will run riot, which we've already looked at, pages 60 to 62, as the heart of unmanageability. So you're welcome to take another look at that in the light of step 3 and remember your experience in the light of step 1. But next week, we're going to pick it up. where we leave off here, but beginning on page 62, because Bill answers the question, what do we mean? That first question of the two questions there on page 60, he answers it in the next paragraph. The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. That's what we mean. Self-will doesn't work. Well, then what do we do? And on page 62 and 63, he answers that question. This is the how and the why of it. And we'll pick it up there next week. So I'd like to begin our discussion tonight.
I got stuck at a sentence in Bill's story, and is the sentence about that God did for him what he couldn't do for himself.
All right.
Or in this.
And how are you stuck?
I thought, is that possible for me?
Is what possible?
Do I believe that God will do for me what I can't do for me?
All right.
Yeah. I thought that it wouldn't be possible for me.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
And I noticed in my prayers also, I pray a lot, but when I'm honest, I don't think that it will help.
Okay. But you pray anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole time.
All right.
But I don't believe in it, really.
All right. But you do it anyway.
I do it anyway. Yeah. And I had some proof that it helped. But I found when we had this question, what I wrote about God and how do I behave, I found I don't behave in the way that I believe it makes a difference to be with God and to live in his presence. I don't behave after that.
Well, and yet you said that you do, actually, that you pray despite your lack of belief or your lack of any sense that it's about reality, but you do it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do it anyway.
Yeah. And so really, I mean, that's what Bill is saying. See, it doesn't matter what you think, and it doesn't matter how you feel. Bill is saying it does matter what you do. And so what's your experience with the step 2 process at this point? Where are you in the decision process?
In the decision to be willing.
All right. Well, no, was that a question or a comment?
That was a question, because I thought about, am I willing?
A question to yourself.
Uh-huh.
Is it a question for me or is it a question to yourself? Because I think it's a question to yourself.
Yes, it is.
So you're not stuck. You're in play. And you have a very vital, conscious question right now. That's all. You're not stuck. You just haven't answered the question.
Yeah. But I thought I am willing, but when I really tried to be really honest, I found I'm not completely willing.
Well, let's examine that.
Uh-huh.
You said you are, in fact, praying and doing the assignments and taking the actions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What is your image of complete willingness?
That I'm really ready to my decision. I'm really ready to believe in
Yeah.
God. I'm really ready to believe in God.
All right. So again, I'll ask a different question. You didn't answer my last question. I'm going to ask this question. So what would really believing in God look like for you?
It would change my life.
In what way?
That I would trust God more than me.
What would trust look like?
That I believe that His will for me is functioning better than mine for me.
All right. You're not really answering my question. You're
No?
sort of using synonyms for what you've already said. So let's try it again. What would it look like if you really did believe?
I wouldn't try to manage my life myself. I would trust that God knows better than me, because my experience is that I can't manage my life really to have a life as I feel it's good. It's a good life in my view.
Yeah. But in
Uh-huh.
relationship to step 2 and the assignments, what would belief and trust look like for you?
Believe.
I'm spending this time with you, and I hope everybody is embracing that this is, in fact, the model of coming to believe. You're in process of reflecting on it. I'm asking you to get more concrete in your questions and also in what your vision is of what that would look like if it, in fact, was your reality. And everybody can benefit from this line of questioning. That's why I'm spending the time with it. It's at the bullseye of step 2, I believe. And you've already answered it, but you don't know that you've answered it.
Ah,
Mm.
to believe in God means that I know.
Ah, there you go. Yeah, that I know with certitude. Sorry, honey, that's not the definition of faith. You see, you have a misperception of your expectation. That's why I'm spending the time in asking you and everybody else to ask themselves this question. What will it look like? What are the results? If I really do believe, if I really do embrace step 2, what's it going to look like? Oh, I'm going to have certitude and I'm going to have a strong feeling. Yeah, no, not at all. Now, you might, but that's
Mm.
the essence of step 2. The essence of step 2 is this empty decision. And then you've answered the question. You say, you do the prayer anyway. You do the assignments anyway. You show up for the weekly meetings anyway. And that's my definition of trust. And apparently it's yours, although you've not made the connection.
How do you mean that, Herb?
You're behaving.
Yeah?
You're behaving. You made a decision, but it hasn't got any concreteness for you, but you're operating as if it's true.
Ah,
It doesn't get any better than that, actually.
yeah. That's it.
That's it.
That's a problem.
No, it's not. It's the solution. It's the answer. It's not a problem. It's the reality. Occasionally, you and or anybody else might have some sense of certitude, or you might have some sense of feeling, and that'll come and go. It's very cyclical, and it's just not necessary.
Ah,
Yeah, for me, it broke the code for step 11. This very conversation and the conclusion that I came to it gave me such a sense of relief for my meditation. Because it doesn't matter what I think and it doesn't matter what I feel. It does matter that I show up. That's it. Yep.
okay. Okay. And what helped me, Herb, was when you say that it's changing, that it's sometimes there and sometimes not. Because I had moments when I felt in connection, total, and I felt, yes, now I'm there. But it vanished.
Um,
Yeah.
not, yeah, but it's temporary. Now,
Yeah.
I'm assuming that you experience that periodically, cyclically.
Yeah. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's the journey.
Ah, and you think it will increase?
We'll see, huh?
Hopefully.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, we'll see. I wonder what came to believe means.
That it's a process.
That's it. That it is a process. That's right. Thank you for really being present to this conversation. It was helpful, I believe, to you, but it was really helpful to everybody else. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks, Herb.
No. Thank you. That was marvelous. Thank you very much.
I found it interesting that when Bill was talking in step 2 in We Agnostics, he used the words that what's important are honesty, humility, and honesty, willingness, honesty, openness, and willingness. Honesty, humility, and willingness. And then, and in the program, the big how, honesty, openness, and willingness. And I thought, oh, isn't that interesting? Because he says honesty, humility, and willingness. And that really, that struck me. And it really, because I know for me in working step 2, how really helped me a lot. But I really liked the HHW version more. But then when I went to the 12 and 12 and read step 2, he does say the honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness version. So I just thought that was interesting. So I wanted to share that. And then I have been bewitched, if you will, because that's how it's felt, my whole recovery with this punishing God thing, that even though the exercise of what do you really believe, even though intellectually I know that's not true, emotionally I would always end up coming back to that. And it would always end up that part of me would have this fear of being punished. And I finally, in going through the steps in one of my other programs, I really examined that, and again, you take a look again. What do you really believe and all that, and so finally, I'm so sick of this. I don't have the power to not believe it, is what I really came to. I cannot change the fact that my heart keeps engaging with this punishing parent. And I don't need to tell you the history, but it's real. Why I would, because that's what I experienced my whole childhood, of my 2 authority figures. And so finally I decided, you know what, if I have no power, I need help from the power that I do know is there. And I did a 6th and 7th step on it. And it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And so that when I did the exercise this time, and that wasn't that long ago, that was, I want to say, 6 to 8 months ago. So when I did the experience this time and I said, what do I really believe? that punitive God thing isn't happening. It just isn't. And so I
What was it replaced by?
love and compassion
Hmm.
and grace.
Hmm.
More than anything, grace. I feel like I'm going to cry because that is something that I've never known. And I have to be real with you, is that, and maybe it's because of the people I've picked, because I'm used to being punished. So let me pick another person that will punish me again. But I haven't seen it modeled a lot in the program in terms of learning that. I mean, I have in a way, but it's mostly been my experience. And it was my experience in working the 12 steps that I realized the promise, God had done for me what I couldn't do for myself. But to engage on a daily basis with this higher power, it is now a grace, compassion experience.
Yeah, really softened it up. Wonderful. Yeah, and that was, go ahead.
No, it's been huge. And of course I screw up day in and day out, and now I don't feel afraid to screw up. I don't feel, like when I'm doing my 10th step, I don't feel like, well, I'm going to get whacked for this one, or, like I have to go, well, I did this one again. It's like, of course I did this one again, is what I know to be real. But, and the other consequence, the natural consequence that's happening too, is that, I feel that I get to grow up more, because being punished, when you're in that cycle, you don't really have to experience the reality of your behavior, because I'm getting punished and I'm so focused on the punishment that I don't deal with my circumstance. And so now I'm dealing with the reality of the natural consequences of my behavior. And it's like, oh, I didn't like that. And so I think I want to change that because it affected this person or me or just the situation. And I want to do it differently because I didn't like the outcome.
There.
I'm like, oh.
What a gift of consciousness that is. See, Dr. Berger and I do a lot of seminars and events on emotional sobriety. And that's the whole point of it, is to become conscious enough where we self-regulate. And he has a great phrase: we place the center of our gravity deep inside ourselves.
Okay.
We are no longer puppet strings attached to circumstances and outside events. We cut all of the strings to circumstances and outside people and events, and we keep our center of gravity deep down inside ourselves, and we self-regulate.
Okay. Oh, that's awesome. That's beautiful.
Yeah,
And
it's a very good image. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I'm sorry. The last thing I was going to say is that I found out that Gandhi quoted me because that quote I realized the exact same thing in all of this punitive parent thing. I thought, because I have grown, and so my concept God has grown.
Yeah.
And then I opened my big book and I'm like, I found that exact note that you had told us, and I had it written down. I'm like, oh, Gandhi quoted me.
Right.
And but that's what I have experienced, is that as I have grown and changed my concept, and I just gave you a whole example of that.
Yeah.
And so I really get what he was talking about.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's interesting because I'm sponsoring somebody who's going through step 2, who's had a lot of damage in their childhood, and I have found step 2 to be so poignant. When I first went through it, I just kind of like, okay, I don't really believe, let me just act as if and go on, and that was really appropriate at the time.
Absolutely.
Because the promise came true. God did for me what and that's when I realized, oh, I really do have a faith, and it built on from there. But this, in the last 2 times I've done the steps, step 2 has been poignant for me.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but maybe you do. But I just, yeah, no, I don't either.
It's
But,
that dimmer switch concept that as we stay gently pressed up against it, there's more light
mhm,
and then more light. And at some point, there's sufficient light to make a difference.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, yeah. Well, yeah. So thank you again.
Step two, I decided I need my higher power to be like, I call it my dominatrix, because I really need a caring, loving kind of like creator, parent figure, mother figure. I have this beautiful Madonna figurine, but I need really the structure, power structure to do the things. I came into this workshop really wanting to develop a consistent prayer and meditation practice, and that's what I feel like I'm most powerless over. I'm like, I know what I need to do to connect with God, but I'm powerless over the willingness to do the footwork.
Yeah, that's just not true.
Okay, tell
Yeah,
me.
that's just not true. The one thing you have power over is willingness or unwillingness.
Okay,
All right.
all right,
Now, you might not have power over the action to pursue the willingness, but you have the power to be willing or not willing. But pushing it back a little bit further, you have to figure out what is the benefit or the value proposition. Why would you want to be willing? Why would you want to take any action?
because I like how I feel when I'm in the flow. Like before I went on my trip, I was feeling pretty in the flow. I'm doing tons of meetings and
Yeah.
this workshop, and I'm putting about 5 or 6 hours a week into this workshop. And I'm doing more meditation and prayer more consistently than I have before. Then I went on the 17-day trip and stopped pretty much all of it except for prayer and talking to my sponsor a few times. And I can see how I went down the shitter
Sure.
completely.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it
So,
wasn't a strong enough value or benefit to you that you would continue it. And therefore you see that's why that dimmer switch metaphor is so powerful. If I stay leaning, I don't mean, with any arm wrestling. I meant just leaning gently into it. It will not go backwards. It will at least go forward just a little bit, but it
right,
won't go backwards. But if
right,
in fact I let off, it'll go backwards automatically because that's how it's wired. And
right,
so what you did was just like, oh, this is really good, but now I need to do something else. Boop.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I see it very clearly. How the difference in the quality of my life and
Yeah.
feeling
So
connected.
now you're back. How long are you back?
I've been back a week.
And how are you doing with the leaning into the dimmer switch?
Better,
So
definitely much
is
better.
is your life getting a little bit? Do you feel a little bit better that you're in a good direction?
Yes, definitely.
All right.
Definitely.
So
I
all right.
do.
So what
I
is
do.
now? Tell me though about. See, now we're talking right now. We've been talking about you and your will and your willingness and your actions. But what about God? What role does God have in any of this?
I think God is there when I, when I make connection. I feel like God is an effect of the searching. Like if I search, if I spend time with
Maybe that's just not true.
okay.
Maybe the God is there at all times, but without your attempt at connecting, then in fact it's not translated into action. But the God of my understanding, as Bill says,
Right.
is everything. If God is everything, God is always totally 100% present.
I am afraid that I I'm afraid that the one thing I can't handle is my Lyme disease symptoms get really, really.
Wait. You see how you're not answering my question. Why do you, every time I talk to you about God, you talk about yourself?
Well, maybe God. Well, God is inside all of us. I mean,
No,
I
no,
believe.
no, don't mouth words to me. Don't give me formula. Don't quote me the book. That's not what I'm asking. Get very real with me. What do you believe about God?
I guess I'm afraid. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what to
I
say.
believe that.
Thank you.
I believe that. I don't know what I believe. That's your truth.
Hmm.
When I'm feeling good, I believe in God.
Hmm.
When I'm taking action toward God, I feel God's there. But if I'm not feeling good or if I'm not taking action, then God's irrelevant.
Well, I believe God's there. I'm just choosing not to access God.
Okay, that might be true too. I don't think it is, but it might be.
Um, I I would like to.
Normally, we do things in our best interest. So that's the conscious motivator. What is in your best interest? God is not very relevant or in your presence because you've not made a decision that it's so. I don't know that. I'm exploring it with you because you very have moments of being very disconnected.
Yeah, I think that I think that I have, there's a thing that I've struggled with for years. I've told you before, I haven't used alcohol since 94, but I have chronic Lyme disease, and on and off over the years, I've gone on and off with medication. And I've had periods of, like, where it talks about some people have grave emotional and mental disorders. Sometimes I wonder if my physical disorder doesn't keep me at times from being able to be unblocked, because at different times I've chosen to use pain medication to
Yeah.
function.
Well, it may be true, and then it may be just smokescreen in a story to cover up you not being consistent.
Right. No, I know I'm not consistent, and
Well,
that's
but you're cutting yourself an awful lot of slack. Don't you know I have Lyme's disease and that gets in my way, and that's just a crock.
okay. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah. All right.
Okay.
Yeah. So stay present to this. Stay focused on this. Do the best you can in prayer meditation on a daily basis and with the assignments and see what happens.
Okay.
I am practicing as well as I can. I'm meditating. I'm reading the book, praying when I remember to, other than the Serenity Prayer and third step prayer, which I automatically say. Um,
What about why do you pray?
to ask for help
From?
myself,
Okay. So you're praying to yourself?
Well, I guess I am.
Okay.
That's not how I think of it.
All
It's
right. I'm
just,
I'm okay with that, by the way. Yeah. But Dr. Berger, who is my colleague in emotional sobriety, he's 49 years sober, but he's also a clinical psychologist, PhD clinical psychologist. He talks about, in this context, the best in me deals with the worst in me. He talks about my true self and my higher self. So I'm fine with your having this relationship with your higher self, with your better self, with your true self. That's good. I like it.
yeah, thank you.
Well, I mean, I'm just supporting you, but also using you as a moment of teaching for everybody else to broaden and be very inclusive in our vocabulary as our search for this power that we're looking for. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I wish I could personalize the power a little more.
Mm.
I know it's there. It's there. It's everywhere. It always has been
Mm.
and always will be. And doesn't need my 2 cents on how it should be.
So
But
did you do the assignments for step 2?
yes,
Oh, well, I never assume. And
yeah.
what was your conclusion at the end of that assignment in terms of the attributes and qualities God needs to be for you?
And that was a difficult one. And I don't think I was, well, the attributes were caring, loving, kind, funny. Always there. I think kind's a big thing for me because I get really, really down on myself for not doing things the way I should be. And actually, when I ask for help, what I'm asking for is that I see things more clearly or clearly at all, and that can be really tangible parts of my day. It can also be how I think and feel about other people and respond to the world around me. I need help with it. I still struggle with this unmanageability, not struggle so much. You've helped a lot with the second part of the first step. I was aware of the bedevilments before I heard you. And I thought, oh, isn't that nice? But I had no connection, none. And now it's like, oh, wow, that's what that's really about.
Right.
That's it's me. It's me. I think I need probably more willingness, more focus would certainly help. I've always needed more focus.
Well, wait, what you were saying was so wonderful and broad and inclusive. Why did you now take a little negative turn where you're not doing it, you're not measuring up to your own standards? What happened just now?
I looked away from the screen and I looked around my apartment, which is a mess.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like, if you were really getting this, you would have done more in your apartment. You'd be neater than you are right now.
Yeah. You hear a lot of reprimanding parental voices, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
So it's your challenge here to begin reframing these voices. Because what you were saying before you turned negative was very positive about a power other than yourself and sort of your experiences with aspects of the assignment. But then you went sour. So it's probably a habit that you have. And I'm just bringing it to your attention because it's not serving you well. And I'm saying you have the power. You have the power to reframe it. As soon as you begin talking or thinking or feeling in any ways negative, reframe it into something positive. And I'm not talking about trickery. I'm not talking about New Age subtleties. No, I'm not. I'm just talking about you're responsible for your life and your attitude. Yeah?
Yes.
And so focus on those positive attributes of a power other than yourself. And pray in that set-aside attitude for the incorporation of those positive attitudes in yourself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Many people have said that when we begin to think about or project, or construct our concept of God, and many people talked about it earlier and on other calls, it's really a projection of who they want to be. And that's why when you started out by saying, I talk to myself, I'm asking help from myself. I think I totally reinforced that. I hope for you. Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll work on
No, thank you for sharing it. It gave us a new avenue of exploration. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I've been doing good. I feel like my attitude is improving. I feel like, I'm kind of grasping more this thing with God, which has always been a big challenge for me, trusting and things like that, the whole works. In my background, I'm not saying this is an excuse, but there's a lot of trauma and I get stuck. Hurt from the past comes up and it throws me big time in like relationships with my family.
Sure.
I've had lots of therapy. You were saying, you were talking about step 3 and being in alignment with reality, pray for guidance, talk to somebody, make a decision to accept and adjust to reality, my emotions. You said when you're suffering, I am doing something what? I couldn't write as fast as you were talking.
Let me just restart that. When you're suffering, you're out of alignment with reality, meaning you're at cross purposes with reality. It says,
what if the reality is, it's a lot of old wounding coming up in relationships today? How do you
deal with it? What are you talking about? What are you talking about, old woundings? If you're disturbed, there's something wrong with you. So what's your disturbance?
Well, hurt.
Okay. So you're hurt. You're hurt. You're hurt, and you feel rejected at the present moment
by certain people. That
and what if it's true? Wait, what if it's true that they in fact have rejected you? So what? That's just what they do. Why? No. Why are you hurt?
Well, it hits on my old wounds of not being good enough.
I'm going to call bullshit. It's your problem. Put your big girl pants on now. How long ago did these offenses take place?
Many years.
Yeah. But, why don't you let? No. I'm not going to let you swim in the swamp. Why don't you let these go? See, now all of this is preparing you for, and it's very organic that you're asking these questions. And that's why we're approaching step 4. And step 4 is like a 4 to 5 month process as we go down inventory to try to develop an understanding of the nature of these hurts and betrayals and sources of fear and anger in us. But the problem is not your past. The problem is not your circumstances. The problem is not the people in your life. The problem is your reaction currently to all of that. That's the problem.
So how do I change my reaction?
That's right.
I've been working with God, and
yeah, well, now you're working. No. The answer is very simple. You do an inventory and you do the 5th and 6th and 7th step. And on the other side of it, you will at least have some more information and probably a whole lot more transformation, meaning all of this will be minimized in a way that you'll be able to see it and also to manage it and also to have hope that you'll be doing better in managing it down in the near future. It won't happen by next week, but it will happen by the end of this process.
I've seen improvements, but
if you have improvements already, that's wonderful. But we're not even really addressing the primary issues, which we will do in steps 4 through 9.
Yeah, I just get thrown big time when it comes up again.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. Do you have a sponsor?
Yes, I do.
All right. Do you talk to your sponsor?
Yes, I do.
All right. Great. Then show up here, do the work progressively, pray for progress yourself, and then talk to your sponsor about any sort of concerns that you have as you're navigating this process. You're definitely on the right track, and you're becoming very conscious of these things, and you're asking really good questions, but you're not able to actually absorb the answer, and you don't have the tools yet to dismantle all of this story that you have about your past. Your story is true. It all did happen. All right. But your story now is irrelevant.
Yeah, like I said, I feel like sometimes I do well with it, and then I get thrown big time.
Exactly. No, I understand that. That's welcome to, and I say it regularly. You might all get tired of me saying it. Welcome to the human race. That's exactly right. And in step 10, it says when we're disturbed, meaning that we're going to get disturbed on a daily basis. Now, at one time, we're disturbed at the larger level, but over time, we get very, rather than 500-pound tuna, we're disturbed by mosquitoes. It's all relative.
Yeah, I just hate getting knocked down.
Well, I understand that. And it sounds to me like you got enough energy to get back up. Yep, that's how we learn to walk, isn't it? The little tall, I watch them in the park, the 1 and 2 year old toddlers, they're always falling down and they're always getting up. And the 3 and 4 year olds very seldom fall down.
Yeah, it hurts like hell though.
Oh well. Yep. Then you'll learn not to fall so frequently because you'll learn tools as to maintain your balance. And that's emotional sobriety. On the other side of 9, that's emotional sobriety, self-regulation and balance. And if you have any real desire to hear more about that, I did in September, I believe it was, I did a 3-hour session on step 10 and emotional sobriety. All right.
Yeah, I've been using your format for 10 and 11, and I feel like I have grown tremendously.
Yeah. Well, you're really clear. No, you're really clear, and you got this wonderful energy. You're asking really good questions. So it's about, I guess I'm going to have to be a little bit more patient than I want to be.
When you asked her the question, what decision did you make about God?
Yeah.
I thought we just had to make a decision. God either is or he isn't. So my decision was he is.
Yeah.
So how do I then follow on to work out what sort of relationship do I want?
What was the final question in step 2?
What qualities?
That was a preliminary question in response to page 53. But what was the final question in response to the end of our discussion after Bill's story? What is go ahead.
What qualities was it and attributes?
Yeah. Your concept. What is that for you?
Well, to sum it up, as opposed to reading a whole list, it's God, for me, God, what do I need God? I need God to have sufficient power, to be present, and to be a teacher, I wrote here. So maybe teacher.
Nice, yeah.
And a healer, to heal me.
There. Mm-hmm.
Guide me. So that's sort of,
Yeah, no, a teacher and healer, wonderful concepts. Yeah, guidance and healing, wonderful. Yeah. All right. So what relationship would that signify? Would that connote for you?
I thought for me, 2 things came up, teacher and healer. So I thought teacher, God could be the teacher, could be the student.
Pupil, sure. Disciple, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And if it was a healer, would I be healed? No.
I don't
What would I?
know. I don't know. Do you think
Yeah.
maybe something to do with the spiritual malady?
Okay.
Do you
That's
have any brokenness that needs to be fixed? Uh-huh.
Oh, yes.
That wasn't a trick question. Right.
Oh, good.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Doctor, please bring the splints.
Okay. So what would be one word, the opposite of heal? Because so you got teacher,
Right. No, that's
student.
your question. That's your question.
Oh, okay. So I have to reflect on it, right?
There's no right answer here. There's just your answer.
Mm.
Yeah, this is the gift of this process. See, don't look at me for an answer, or the book, or the other people for the correct. No, what's your answer? What's your deepest soul and heart yearning for a
You know what?
relationship?
For me, the word that comes up is inner contentment. I just want peace.
There you go. Yeah.
Mm.
Stay with it. See what you just did, and I heard it in the tone of the word, not the word itself, just the way you expressed it here. All right, that you reach down deep inside yourself for that. Stay with that and allow it. Maybe that's not the right word or phrase or feeling,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that's the path.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to choose the right word because I thought,
Of
oh, it
course.
doesn't sit right.
No, of course. No. You need the right key to open the lock, right?
Yeah, of course.
No,
Yeah, I'm on.
wrong.
I know.
There's no key.
Okay.
Other
So
than
I can
the
just
willing.
balance between teacher and healer. It doesn't have to be one, does it?
No, I love the concept. It's a coin.
Okay.
It's a coin having two
Okay.
sides.
Great. Because perfect. That's probably been my struggle, wanting to have the perfect
Of course.
word right. Okay, good. Thank you.
Great conversation for everybody. Thank you. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The phrase I wrote down when you said, and yet we know there's more light. And I've certainly received so many gifts from several rounds through the steps. And I think what I might want to check in with you about is just as you were discussing how it works and reading that initially, I was intrigued with just how that little anxiety came up again around rigorous honesty. And I think I'd like to find just even more peace around that, knowing, kind of just give myself, or I guess I want to ask about it more. Just I've always had this sense like I haven't been honest enough, and I think it has, there's always more I can see, and every time I've gone around, I said, God, show me. I'm willing to see what you want to reveal to me. But I sometimes have a feeling of it feels more like the I'm not enough thing, like that game is at play here a little bit, because I think I've been as honest as I've known how to be, and I've had good sponsors to help me and guide me and poke me and question. And I've gotten a feeling these last several weeks of just maybe part of the honesty is about just acknowledging some parts of my story or my experience that have been harder to acknowledge, and some of those with some really bad, I think some of the therapy abuse stuff that I went through that actually contributed a lot to my sex addiction. And as I was looking at some of the second stuff last week, I was surprised at how much that came up for me. And I guess what you were just talking about with Thomas Keating was helpful, because I feel probably like I am able to see it more now and be willing to look at some of that and call it what it was. Like, even I think it's strange because I've looked at this and it's been a part of my step work in some way, but the part of the more rigorous honesty is also just to see it like what it was. It was abuse. And because I think a part of me was so invested in having a happy story, kind of always go into the triumphant story before I kind of walk through. So I'm kind of feeling a little bit like part of this rigorous honesty is having to be just like with looking at, not using the inventory as a, here's where you didn't do well, here's where it's, but the inventory is just looking at, this is my life, kind of taking stock of what actually happened. And so I guess I'll just leave it at that, and see if you have any thoughts.
Well, before you leave it, though, what is it that you mean by honesty?
Yeah, it's interesting because I bet there's a part of me that feels like I have this superficial kind of thing, like honesty still means just telling everything. I mean, kind of this reveal all, as if it's, that's what comes up.
Well, because you seem to really have a huge, some sort of a block or at least reaction to the word. And then that's why I asked, wondered what it means to you.
Right. It's probably something for me to sit with a bit,
Yeah.
I could speak to it.
When my sponsor told me in my very first efforts with him, in my first conversations, that part of the program is rigorous honesty, because he knew what a liar I was and how dishonest I was. He never said that, but he knew it. And he started to explain rigorous honesty, and he said, it's transparency.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what's that? He said, your insides and your outsides match. I still didn't know what he meant, but then I agreed with him because I didn't want to pursue that in a conversation any longer as a newcomer. But as I did a fourth step, I really got a handle on what that means.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah. I think I've been as transparent as I could have been so far.
I wonder if that's true, that's what you think, because of the way that you approached it. It seemed to me that you're one of those perfectionists that I was talking about early on, and that in fact, although that's what you want to think and believe, that there's an underneath shadow that says, yeah, but it's really, I could do better if I really was better. And if I really was who I think I want to be, I would in fact be doing better in the honesty area. That's what I heard you say.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on something really clear for me there. Yeah, I get all tangled up, and I want to kind of feel like almost unnecessarily, because there's a part of me that really gets. I'm just simplifying everything. I think my life is simplifying my understanding, connection with God. I loved your question of, what do you yearn for in a relationship? Because
yeah,
I answered that simply. I felt like I yearn to be known and to be seen,
mm-hmm.
be heard, and I also long for that from me. I want to see and hear and know. I'm very interested in the God of truth and reality that you're speaking of so frequently. Mm-hmm. I'm really interested in that. And I wasn't raised with that. I was raised with a story, like we all were, I guess. But I crave that. I yearn for that. And I think with my honesty stuff, I'm just noticing as you're speaking here tonight too, that there was so much kind of the practice of hiding and dishonesty, especially around gay stuff. It was such a dark hole sin.
Right.
And I think it's just, I'm just acknowledging too, part of the honesty is to say, this healing is just taking its time. And I'm patient, and I've received so much, but I still am so humbly in need of that care. You had us look up the definitions, and there were several definitions, but the one that jumped off the page was just painstaking or watchful attention. I desire that. I need it. I am grateful that that's what that care can mean. And when I feel that care, and that's usually where I've leaned, it's where my dimmer switch has been most. I lean it on fast. I see the need for care, and I lean into it. Then I start to feel safe again. Like, I don't need to be afraid of this word, honesty. I can, and as you already said at the beginning, I'm on this rocket ship. I'm listening, I'm paying attention, and this rocket ship is going to take me through another step 4 here with you.
Yeah. No, it will. Now, not without an awful lot of our hands on the instruments and making decisions about guiding the rocket. But the rocket the steps are now working us.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
This is helpful. I appreciate just being willing to letting me jabber here a bit, because it's I've been really deliberate here of just wanting to have that be part of my honesty too, is just keeping it real and not coming up with a summary statement for myself before I have one.
Well, see, and that's the truth of what we're doing here and what I'm trying to model in our conversations, and that is there's not a formula here. There's not right answers here. There's your thoughts and there's your feelings and there's your experience, and those are as valid as anybody else's.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they can perhaps be more helpful or more healthy as we unpack and move forward, but yeah. It's not about right words and right formulas. It's about healthy thinking and experience.
Mm-hmm.
That's you'll hear me stress it throughout our journey. Is the experience made the difference? As I said, and I'm sure most of you heard me say it. The man said to me at 4 years of sobriety, "You got a lot of information, Herb, but you don't have any transformation." And the difference was I hadn't applied it, I hadn't connected it, I hadn't had an experience with it. So all I could do is jabber, 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 jabber.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I identify.
It's the integration that there's an embodiment that's happening. Now, that means that you're also digging down underneath and there's a little bit of a sewer flow. So it could be dark. And when we get into the 4th step, it overflows.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're doing here, is preparing the connection to and relationship with power so that we can go navigate the sewer.
Yeah. Amen. Well, I'm so grateful that we're in the 3rd step now too, because it's the strength in that action that you speak of has been so meaningful in my life. Just the power of that decision, and for me, I feel called to, when I slip back into forgetting or fear, keep making that decision hourly, daily. Reconnect with that which I've identified as the power that I.
That's it. That's as good as we get.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Here's where I am in my journey. Through my meditations, I'm a little stuck on step 3 with believing that God is going to care for me.
Yeah.
All of the time, through thick and thin, whatever.
Yeah.
And I've just been taking it to meditation every day. And it's come to me that it's a very immature way or infantile way of thinking of it. And then it's come to me that that's really how I was raised, with kind of a guilt and shame environment. Anything was wrong, boom, there was a consequence. And, any misstep, there was a distance when I had a break with my food, when I, hurt someone, that I just wasn't in his graces or in his caring world. And so I took it to my prayer, and I'm coming around with it. It's still hard to let it all go, but I feel like I have moved in that I've turned a little bit in a more mature direction. And if I make mistakes, or if I do this or that, so be it. I pick up and go on. And I was in where I live. I was in an FA group, and you were you were disconnected from a sponsor when you had a slip,
Right.
and it just reinforced that. And I
Yes.
stepped away from that because I just couldn't do it. I couldn't handle that kind of. Maybe that's making excuses, but it
No,
just
no, it's
worked
not.
for me. It did
It's
not
not.
work for me.
It's not submitting to a very unhealthy culture of shaming and guilting.
Well, it just was, and you're back again. And then I thought, the heck with this. So
Yeah.
since I've moved, I have not had lengthy abstinence, but I'm working on it.
Yeah.
And I need to go forward. And it feels better to have some of that understanding now from doing the study and doing the meditating. It's beautiful how it comes to you, this understanding, when you're thinking or not thinking, but just being with, God. It's been very helpful, and I feel freer. I feel lighter. So that's where I am.
All right. Thank you very much. And it's the fidelity to the gentle action. Fidelity meaning that we're as consistent as we can be, knowing that we can't be that consistent as we want to be, but taking the actions, probably not as well as we think we should, knowing that that's as good as we get, but also knowing that we could probably do better, but we can't really do better. And kind of like living in that place of progress, not perfection, that Bill talked about,
Right.
that I read about today.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And that only gentleness works with me. It doesn't
Yeah.
work brimstone and fire. It does not work for me.
It actually really doesn't work for anybody.
No.
Now, it has its moments of control from the outside, but it never becomes self-regulating.
Right. Right.
And that's the whole point of becoming fully human and fully alive, is that we take full responsibility and we are who we are no matter who's watching.
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe, then I hope to move to a greater understanding or step towards self-love.
Mm-hmm.
Because you never love yourself gently and fully when you're like the taskmaster. You don't. I don't anyway. I should speak only for myself.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Very wonderful conversation, as I mentioned earlier, very vulnerable and very courageous. I so enjoy it. Thank you for all of your efforts and your honesty. Please join me in the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Thanks, everybody. Have a good week.